Welcome to Paris and welcome to Autocar's guide to the best, the newest, the most exciting and most interesting from the 2016 Paris Motor Show. The fallout continues from Volkswagen's cheating of emissions tests, so it is on a charm offensive which is started by the ID Concept. Volkswagen's announced it's going to make at least 5 pure electric vehicles by 2020, no emissions at all, you'll note, and this is the first. It is based on a new architecture, completely new architecture, which means there is no packaging of an internal combustion engine, so the fact that this car is the same size as a Golf belies the fact that there's a lot more space inside. The electric motor is packaged at the rear, and this new platform also gives Volkswagen the opportunity to look into autonomous tech. It reckons fully autonomous vehicles will be with us by 2025. And this car allows you to do things like push the steering wheel for 2 seconds, which puts it into fully autonomous mode, and you get a lot more interior space. Volkswagen expects a range of around 250 miles up to 360 miles in normal driving conditions, and an 80% charge in about 30 minutes. This car has 168 horsepower. How much production cars will make is anybody's guess, but Volkswagen says it will do these cars at a similar or lower price than an internally combusted alternative. Think of the BMW X2 as a sporting version of the BMW X1 in the same way that the X6 is kind of a coupe version of the X5. Now this one is behind me is just a show pony, so the silhouette will stay the same, but you can expect most of the details to be toned down by the time it makes production. Power on the production car will come from 1.2 litre petrol and a range of diesel engines, and it will cost from around 30,000 quid when it goes on sale in the second quarter of 2018. Behind me is the Lexus UX concept car, which Lexus has not reeled a huge amount of detail around. It won't tell us what it's powered by, for example. But what I can tell you significantly is that as it's smaller than the NX and the RX crossovers, we think it will replace the CT200H hatchback in Lexus's range. SUVs and crossovers are where it's at, hatchbacks are not. It gets a lot of standard concept car cues. It's got suicide rear doors, rear-facing cameras, and plastic tyres that appear to be moulded at about 23 inches large. Don't expect those to make the production car, but what it also has is a pair of tailpipes, which does give a clue as to what the powertrain will eventually be. Lexus and Toyota have this brilliant, simple petrol-electric hybrid powertrain, and the UX, if it is the CT200H replacement, will come fitted with that. The next generation Honda Civic arrives early next year, but we've already got a Type R concept. Now, the previous Type R concept was shown again and again and again before the car went on sale, but this one will be on sale before the end of next year. The other interesting thing, the last time Honda showed a Civic Type R concept of the previous generation car, the concept looked exactly like the road car, and you can expect the same thing to happen here. Now, power comes from an upgrade of the previous car's 306 horsepower 2-litre turbo engine. It's going to have to make more than that because Honda wants to regain the Nürburgring lap record for front-wheel drive cars, which it lost to Volkswagen's Club Sport S. Now, that stands at currently 7 minutes 49 seconds. If Honda wants to make serious inroads into that, you could expect this car to have, I would think, at least 20 horsepower more, possibly even more than that. Expected to cost around 30,000 quid when it arrives towards the end of 2017. There's no all-new model from Ferrari at Paris, but there are some interesting derivatives. For one, there's an Aperta LaFerrari, which has got some interesting aerodynamic changes so that it doesn't cook the occupants with its radiators. Plus, Ferrari celebrates its 70th anniversary next year. Now, it is introducing 70 different liveries, one available on each model, so 350 cars in total from its history, which is quite a cool idea. But the biggest news they've got is the fact that the GTC4 Lusso, which has previously only been available with a naturally aspirated V12 and four-wheel-drive, is going to become available with a derivative of the California's 3.9-litre V8. Now, at 600 horsepower, it generates quite a lot, 70 horsepower less than the V12, but it has 47 pounds-foot of torque more, and it's available from lower down in the rev range. And the car's 80 kilos lighter because it's only rear-wheel drive. It's quite an interesting take on the GTC4 for customers who don't want the full V12 experience, and it'll cost around about £200,000, about 35 grand less than the V12. Slightly more prosaic then is the Renault Zoe, a new variant of it which has a 400 kilometre, so it says there, 250 mile range. Now, we expect that to be about 180 miles in real-world driving, but it's still one of the best ranges for a mainstream electric car. That's possible because it has a new battery which is 41 kilowatt hours in capacity. It's about twice the current capacity, but is no larger or heavier than the current battery. It's just much denser, a new generation battery that Renault is using. No prices have been announced yet for the car, which goes on UK sale in November, but expect it to be a fair bit more than the 19 grand that the current car charges, including £4,500 government grant. In amongst all the production vehicles, it's nice that there's room for a wild, old-fashioned concept car. This is the Renault Tresor, French for treasure. What does it mean from a production perspective? Well, not a lot. This car is longer than a Range Rover Sport, but only as high as a Ford GT, and it's powered by a Formula E motor. What it does represent is Renault's new design language. Renault's chief designer, Laurens van den Akker, who's been in his job since 2009, has completely revamped the Renault range once and is about to start doing exactly the same thing again. What's different this time around is that they will also be looking to how you package autonomous technology and that sort of thing. Van den Akker says that soon technology will invade everything. It is easier to move down market than up market. That's why Hyundai finds it difficult to sell an executive car at £50,000, but Audi finds it easy to sell a Super Mini at £15,000. Now, Hyundai does not have a bad image, but it does want to seem more interesting and more emotive. Hence the car you see behind me, the RN30 Concept, which previews a hot hatchback, which will arrive next year. Based on the i30, which is sort of Ford Focus sized, it will go head-to-head with the Ford Focus ST when it arrives. Now, the N comes from Nürburgring, where Hyundai has an engineering base and where it races an i30N Concept in the 24-hour race. Now, the actual road car will therefore not look like this concept car nor the race car. It'll look more like, well, sort of halfway between the standard cars that are on my right and this car behind me. It also will not have 375 horsepower like the car behind me does. Instead, expect its 2-litre engine to make about 250 horsepower, which should put it on the nose of the Ford Focus ST, as will its price of around £25,000 when it arrives next year. Audi has rebranded its performance division. What was Quattro GmbH has become Audi Sport, and this, the RS3 Saloon, is the first product out of the stable. Another 7 cars will follow in the next 18 months. The RS3 Saloon uses a 2.5-litre 5-cylinder engine, and Audi is obviously quite keen to crush the BMW M2 and Mercedes A45 AMG because it has a nice around 400 metric horsepower. That's 394 brake in old money. Front and rear tracks are wider than a standard A3. It sits an inch lower. It's got a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission and massive brakes. And there is no price yet because it goes on sale in the middle of next year, but it's got to be pushing towards £50,000. Another SUV then, this is Audi's production Q5, which is very closely related to the A4 underneath and is lighter than the old Q5, which had been on sale since 2009, to the tune of about 90 kilograms. Now, like the platform, most of the engines will be shared with the A4. In fact, like most large Audis, they'll have a range of 4-cylinder and 6-cylinder petrol and diesel engines. Later, there'll be a hybrid, plug-in hybrid probably, but that won't be available at launch, which is the start of next year. When it does go on sale, we expect it to be a fair bit more expensive than the current Q5, which starts at 32 grand. Don't be surprised if this one starts at nearer 38. So the last generation Micra was built for Asia and mildly adapted for Europe, and it really felt it. Nissan will not thank us for saying it, but it was one of the most forgettable Super Minis around. But now all of that is due to change because this is the new Micra and Nissan wants it to go toe-to-toe with Europe's best Super Minis. It's larger, 1mm within 4 metres long, and it is much, much bigger inside and is of much higher quality inside too. There are soft materials abounding everywhere. It's got 125 different options before you even get into the engine and trim level. Engines will range from 0.9-litre petrols through to 1.5-litre diesels. Most of them will have about 90 horsepower, but the range will eventually encompass everything from 70 brake to 120 brake. We'll drive it in November, and it goes on sale in March next year. Prices haven't yet been announced then, but because Fiestas and Polos get good at about 11.5 grand, you can expect it to be really competitive. Nissan will hope it's good because Renault's Clio will be based on exactly the same platform when that is replaced. This offset number plate you see behind me then is all that really remains of the old Land Rover Discovery 4's design language. Land Rover admits that the new Discovery 5 is a massive shift in design terms. What else has massively shifted between Discovery 4 and Discovery 5 is the fact that 480 kilograms has come out of the old car's curb weight. So this is a new Discovery 5 then, but it does do lots that the Discovery 4 still does. Land Rover says it is its most capable off-roader ever. It has a greater weight depth. It will go further off-road. It has an 8-speed automatic gearbox and still has a low-ratio transfer case. Power initially comes from a 2-litre Ingenium diesel engine making 237 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot, but bear in mind this car now weighs only 2 tonnes rather than 2.5. There'll also be a 3-litre V6 making 255 horsepower. Doesn't sound a lot more, but bear in mind it's probably a lot more torquey and a lot more lazy. And there'll also be a 3-litre V6 making 355 horsepower. Now, despite the fact this looks far more Range Rover-y than before, because it's a Land Rover, not a Range Rover, do not expect there to be an SVR version. Prices of £45,000 to £65,000 are as high as it will get. And if wondering why the design language has moved on for Discoveries, bear in mind a new Defender is due in 2 to 3 years' time. If you're wondering where the boxy, blocky design language for Land Rover has gone, expect it to reappear when the new Defender does. Forget the Evo, Mitsubishi has bet the farm on SUVs and low emissions. Just like the car behind me is called the GTP HEV, and if that's too many initials, it stands for Ground Tourer, not Grand Tourer, Ground Tourer. plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. Now, like the Outlander PHEV, it has a plug-in hybrid electric powertrain. This one has a 2.5 litre petrol engine in the front, augmented by 3 electric motors. There is a 120 horsepower motor for the front, 2 electric motors at the back of 60 horsepower each, and the nice thing about that is it means it can torque vector, put power when it wants to, where it wants to. On electric power alone, it has a range of 70 miles. With the engine thrown in too, it has a range of 700 miles. There's no performance output for the petrol powertrain just yet, but all in, this is a big car, bigger than the ASX, bigger than the Outlander PHEV, so it doesn't suggest that it's going to replace either of those. What it does show is what the next generation Shogun could look like. Now, that's always been a big, rugged, roughy-tufty off-road diesel. Whether the electric motors can replicate that level of pull and grunt remains to be seen. Like Volkswagen, Mercedes is developing an entirely new platform for electric vehicles, and it will sell them as a sub-brand like Smart, AMG and Maybach. This, the Generation EQ Concept, is the first of those cars, and we should see a production version by 2019. By 2025, Mercedes expects to have more than 10 pure EVs in its range, which will account for anything up to 25% of its sales. This car has a 70 kilowatt hour battery, and like the rest of the car, it is scalable, so they can make it lesser powerful or more powerful. This one has got 2 electric motors totaling 406 brake horsepower. Now, this is still a concept, but we should see a production version within 2 years prior to it going on sale before 2020. Thank you for joining us. For more detail on all these stories and more, click to autocar.co.uk and subscribe. Click here.